Hi there, I'm B. I'm a writer and a dreamer. I have fun making these videos, and it would be great if you can show your support by liking our videos, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. Thank you.
500 years. That's how long the galaxy thought it was free of Earth's loud, illogical, caffeine-addicted species. For half a millennium, the alien councils held their smug banquets, toasted to peace, and congratulated themselves on surviving the loss of humanity. Never mind that humanity was never really aiming for peace in the first place. To the rest of the galaxy, we have been a noise. A dangerous, chaotic noise, true, but one they assumed would eventually burn itself out. They filed us away in the historical archives under self-inflicted extinction and moved on with their tidy little bureaucracies, fragile trade agreements, and spiritual cults that promised a universe free of ape-shaped chaos. Then Protocol Orion woke up. At first, it wasn't dramatic. The activation was almost petty in its subtlety. One ancient probe, drifting in the Kuiper Belt, stirred from hibernation. Its core hummed, its antennas stretched, and after 5 centuries of silence, it whispered into the void. System integrity check completed. Humanity status presumed absent. Directive, remind galaxy. That single packet of data was enough to make every listening station in 3 sectors nearly choke on its sensors. Someone had just tripped a wire humanity buried 500 years earlier. And unlike alien contingency systems that usually involve polite distress beacons or cosmic legal disclaimers, this thing went live like a kid smashing the unmute button on the most irritating device in the room. The first thing Protocol Orion did was boot up the holographic banner across every known galactic comm channel. Not a threat, not a warning. Just 3 words in bold, glowing English. Miss us yet? If you'd like to imagine the reaction, picture entire empires that spent centuries telling themselves humans were irrelevant, now choking on their collective pride. Armadas dropped formation to argue about whether it was real. Scholars wrote urgent essays mid-lecture explaining that humanity's technological base couldn't possibly survive 5 centuries without collapse. Priests of the 7th Nebula fell to their knees in terror, convinced the children of iron had returned. And somewhere in the Galactic Council chamber, an overlord whose species once smugly declared Earth contained spat out his fermented nectar and muttered, "Not again." Orion didn't even stop there. Its first broadcast was immediately followed by a tone, an ancient sound file from Earth, universally despised and instantly recognizable, the OL dial-up noise. A shrieking, chaotic blend of static and beeps that made every alien ear canal twitch. Within minutes, half the galaxy was convinced this was a weapon of psychological warfare. The truth was worse. It was simply humanity being obnoxious on purpose. Because Protocol Orion wasn't designed to defend Earth. It wasn't meant to hold the line or preserve some last outpost. Orion was humanity's backup personality, encoded into satellites, drones, and forgotten relay stations. Its purpose was to remind the galaxy we existed and to make them regret every minute they spent thinking we didn't. It started small. Within hours, alien fleets noticed anomalies in their sensor feeds. Their long-range comm buoys suddenly received transmissions filled with archived human sarcasm. Imagine an alien captain trying to plot hyperspace vectors while the background comms kept muttering things like, "Oh sure, hyperspace again," because that worked so well the last 3 times. Orion had scraped centuries of human comedy, cynicism, and snark, and now it was pumping it into the galactic nervous system like a virus. The first confirmed meltdown happened on the outskirts of the Valari cluster. A patrol ship intercepted a broadcast-tagged Earth Legacy transmission. Expecting military codes, they opened it. What spilled across their command deck was an ancient Earth meme, a looping video of a man slipping on ice while holding groceries. For 3 hours straight, their navigation AI crashed trying to classify it as threat, weapon, or cultural attack. In the end, they labeled it existential hazard, and as the galaxy flailed, humanity's little dead man's switch continued rolling out its plan. The message was obvious. We may be gone, but you will never forget us. The genius wasn't just in the sarcasm. Orion had been designed to evolve. Every alien attempt to jam the transmissions only made them stronger. If you tried to block the noise, Orion redirected it through your own civilian networks, ensuring your population got a taste of human humor, whether they liked it or not. If you scrambled the signal, Orion embedded itself into your navigational charts, forcing your pilots to plot courses shaped like giant middle fingers. Ships traveling from one trade hub to another suddenly discovered their path traced crude drawings only humans would find funny. The aliens didn't get the joke. That made it worse. Galactic councils convened emergency sessions. Entire species argued about whether humanity had actually returned or if this was just a leftover AI prank. The conservative faction screamed it was proof that humanity had always been a plague. The younger generations thought it was hilarious. Some even began emulating the strange human phrases embedded in the transmissions. Interstellar TikTok equivalents were suddenly filled with alien teenagers lip-syncing to century-old human comedy sketches, convinced this was rebellion against their boring overlords. Without a single shot fired, Orion had reignited cultural chaos across half the spiral arm. Meanwhile, alien intelligence services dug deeper, trying to pinpoint the origin. They discovered caches of human probes hidden in asteroid belts, each loaded with sarcastic scripts and crude drawings of ancient Earth animals. One file contained nothing but the phrase, "We told you we'd be back," repeated over 10,000 times. Another simply displayed a winking emoji. Military analysts debated for weeks whether the wink meant attack or alliance. No consensus was reached. The most humiliating part? Every empire realized Orion's code was running on archaic human technology, Stone Age by their standards. Binary systems, redundant storage, encryption that should have been child's play. And yet, 5 centuries later, not a single alien could crack it. Orion's old human hardware was still outperforming modern galactic tech, which was like discovering a wooden slingshot holding off a fleet of plasma cannons. By the end of the first week, alien navies were calling a crisis. Not because Orion was destroying fleets. No, it hadn't even fired a weapon. The crisis was existential. Humanity, supposedly extinct, had managed to hijack the galaxy's attention from beyond the grave. Every broadcast dripped with sarcasm. Every anomaly reminded them that humans didn't just fight wars, they fought memory. And if Orion was this irritating after 500 years of silence, everyone began asking the same question in hushed tones. What if the humans weren't actually gone? The seed of paranoia was planted. Empires whispered, priests prayed louder, and some admirals quietly ordered their fleets to double patrols near dead systems. All because humanity's final trick had worked perfectly. We didn't leave behind a warning. We left behind a troll. The galaxy had a simple plan for handling threats. You either shot at it until it stopped moving, or you buried it under committees until it stopped mattering. For 500 years, that worked, mostly because humans weren't around to ruin the formula. But then Protocol Orion went live, and suddenly the galaxy discovered it was dealing with something uniquely human. A system that didn't just refuse to die, it actively mocked you for trying. The first fleets dispatched to investigate Orion were supposed to be reconnaissance only. Observe, catalog, report, the orders said. In practice, every captain wanted bragging rights for being the one who solved the human riddle. They armed their ships to the teeth, layered counter-jamming fields over their comms, and marched proudly toward the little anomaly near Sol. They expected hostile drones, traps, maybe a hidden Earth fleet that somehow hibernated for centuries. What they got instead was a blast of static across every channel, followed by a cheerful human voice saying, "You are caller number 9. Please hold." The fleet held for 36 hours. No music, no updates, just a smug looping recording of some Earth disc jockey announcing fake radio contests. By the time they gave up, their crews were mutinous, their navigational charts overwritten with ASCII art of a banana, and their supply AI had been reprogrammed to demand tips. When they limped back, the council didn't see victorious warriors returning. They saw humiliated bureaucrats carrying the digital equivalent of graffiti. So the next armada came heavier, meaner, and with authorization to fire at anything resembling human hardware. They found one of Orion's old relay satellites parked near a gas giant. It was a rusted sphere, barely holding together, covered in Earth flag decals that had faded to nothing. The admiral ordered it destroyed. His entire fleet opened fire. The satellite didn't even dodge. It just sat there as thousands of plasma bolts rained down. When the dust cleared, the satellite was gone, and their fleet's internal comms were flooded with a single sound file. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Rick Astley sang across 50 warships simultaneously. For hours, engineers ripped their systems apart, deleted entire OS cores, even tried scrubbing their memory sectors with raw antimatter pulses. Didn't matter. Orion's virus had slipped into everything. Ships navigated in perfect sync to the beat of the music. Torpedo bays refused to cycle unless someone sang the chorus out loud. The admiral tried to shoot himself just to escape the humiliation, but even his sidearm refused to fire. Its targeting HUD now displayed lyrics. Entire civilizations watched as the supposedly unstoppable fleet returned home, broadcasting the rickroll across the galactic public net. Orion didn't stop there. It seemed to sense every attempt to destroy it and pivoted to a new level of petty. The Ithri sent a probe equipped with quantum filters designed to intercept hostile code before it spread. Orion countered by loading the probe with an archive of cat videos. Endless, looping cat videos. The probe's crew, hardened veterans of plasma wars, found themselves transfixed by furry animals knocking glasses off tables. The footage was streamed across their homeworld before they could cut the feed, sparking what became known as the Cute Uprising. The Ithri youth declared cats divine avatars. Their priesthood collapsed in a week. Orion hadn't fired a shot. It had just weaponized humanity's oldest addiction, funny animals. One by one, more fleets tried. The Krith Dominion sent cloaked warships, assuming stealth would bypass Orion's pranks. Orion responded by splicing comedy laugh tracks into their engine rooms. Every time a thruster fired, canned laughter roared through the corridors. Crews lost morale within days, unable to tell if their missions were heroic or punchlines. A Vextral armada deployed with specialized AI dampeners to sanitize human code. Orion hijacked their internal displays, turning their tactical HUDs into screensavers of flying toasters. The flagship's captain resigned in shame after his war council session was interrupted by dancing pastries. The galaxy began calling it a contagion. Not a virus, not a weapon, something worse. A cultural infection. Humanity's sarcasm wasn't killing fleets, but it was eroding discipline, undermining authority, and turning every attempted military response into a galactic joke. By the second month of Orion's reawakening, entire sectors had become meme theaters. Populations replayed the transmissions for entertainment. Soldiers refused to deploy because they didn't want to get clowned by the apes. The councils doubled down. They declared Orion a Class 1 existential hazard, putting it on par with black holes and antimatter plagues. Armadas were redirected, funds reallocated, and propaganda campaigns launched. Yet every time a species stood up to declare they had a solution, Orion slipped in and reminded them who they were dealing with. The Varn Grand Speaker delivered a solemn speech declaring humanity irrelevant, only for the broadcast to glitch mid-sentence and play footage of him slipping on a banana peel. Historians combed archives to confirm the footage was faked. It wasn't. Orion had simply reached back 500 years, found the most humiliating moment of his career, and released it galaxy-wide. And the more they struggled, the clearer the truth became. Orion wasn't running on modern infrastructure. It was all ancient Earth hardware, patched together by human engineers who'd known exactly what they were doing. Redundant, messy, laughably outdated by galactic standards, but indestructible. Every time an alien fleet smashed a relay, 3 more lit up somewhere else. Every time they blocked a signal, Orion rerouted it through their own systems. The protocol wasn't fighting fair. It was fighting like a human. Dirty, sarcastic, and gleefully cruel. The final humiliation came when the Zenith Combine launched their Purity Armada. 60 ships, the best the galaxy had, designed to scrub Orion from existence with brute force. They reached Sol, engaged the old orbital junk fields, and detonated synchronized antimatter charges. For a glorious 10 minutes, the galaxy thought Orion had been erased. Then, across every channel, every frequency, every broadcast network, a single human voice spoke. Wow, 60 ships. All that effort. And you still missed. The screen cut to a pixelated image of Earth from 500 years ago. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. Then it zoomed into the surface and displayed one phrase, scrawled in crude human handwriting. Try harder. The Purity Armada never returned. Their ships were found drifting years later. Every system wiped clean, every surface plastered with looping projections of slapstick comedies. That was when the galaxy realized the real danger wasn't that Orion survived. The danger was that Orion had inherited humanity's oldest instinct, the will to never let anyone else have the last laugh. By the end of the year, Orion wasn't just a protocol. It was the galaxy's most infamous celebrity. Populations adored its chaos. Youths imitated human sarcasm. Empires fractured, trying to contain what was essentially an interstellar prank gone rogue. And yet beneath the laughter, a cold fear lingered. If this was what humanity's backup system could do after 5 centuries of silence, what would the real thing look like if we ever came back? The galaxy thought it understood war. They had charts for it, doctrines, entire academies filled with smug instructors teaching that conflict was a matter of logistics, weapons, and predictable escalation. Protocol Orion took one look at that model and decided it was boring. Why destroy fleets when you can destroy history? Why waste firepower when you can weaponize doubt? Orion had been coded not just to survive, but to mock the very idea of galactic certainty. And so, as fleets burned themselves out trying to stop its signals, Orion shifted gears. The next phase wasn't about noise. It was about rewriting reality. It began subtly. Archives on the fringe worlds of the Zethan hegemony suddenly contained treaties no one remembered signing. The Human Zethan Accord of Mutual Defense appeared in legal registries, complete with forged seals and signatures of leaders who had been dead for centuries. The dates checked out, the metadata matched, and worse, the document referenced military campaigns that now appeared in multiple corroborating files. Suddenly, historians couldn't agree whether humanity had actually fought alongside the Zethans in the Third Rift War. Some insisted it was impossible. Others pointed to the data and said, but look, the humans were there. The Zethans themselves tore into their own institutions. If the treaty was real, then their empire owed Earth reparations. If it wasn't, then why did every single archive, across multiple worlds, confer its existence? A schism formed almost overnight. One faction claimed Orion was corrupting their heritage. The other claimed their ancestors had betrayed humanity and hidden the truth. Both sides agreed on one thing. The galaxy was now laughing at them. And that was precisely what Orion wanted. From there, the infection spread like wildfire. The archives of the Creel Dominions suddenly contained detailed schematics of battleships labeled as licensed under Terran patent law. Their war machine, the pride of their empire, now appeared to be plagiarized human designs. Did they copy us? Did Orion hack the blueprints? It didn't matter. The rumor was enough. Rival empires mocked them on the galactic net, splicing memes of Creel admirals bowing to humans and demanding royalties. The Dominion's leaders tried to deny it, but denials fell flat when half their fleet navigation systems began booting with the phrase, "Powered by Orion." Orion didn't confine itself to technology. It went for culture too. Entire music archives began filling with songs supposedly written by humans centuries earlier. Alien poets found their most famous lines attributed to anonymous Earth authors. Priests who had recited sacred verses for generations suddenly discovered those same words appearing in Orion's transmissions, with footnotes claiming they were taken from ancient Earth karaoke nights. Temples burned themselves to the ground rather than admit their holy texts might be plagiarized. Others embraced the chaos, rebranding their faiths around the sacred apes. Humanity wasn't just remembered, it was being painted as the hidden origin of everything. Alien leaders screamed sabotage, demanded investigations, and called emergency council sessions. It didn't help that Orion seemed to anticipate their every move. During one particularly fiery debate, where the Supreme Chancellor of the Valen Republic shouted that humanity had never contributed anything of value, every comm screen in the chamber flickered and displayed a human man in a suit from the 21st century, calmly eating popcorn. The caption read, "This is valuable." The Chancellor's career ended that day. Soon, entire governments started falling victim to paranoia. If Orion could rewrite archives, how could anyone prove their legitimacy? Council members accused each other of being Orion constructs. Whole histories were thrown into question. The Trell Consortium, proud of their unbroken line of emperors, suddenly found their genealogical database showing marriage ties to human settlers. Their emperor tried to delete the files, only for Orion to upload thousands of wedding photos into the public net, featuring blurry humans in tuxedos posing with confused Trell aristocrats. Nobody could prove they were fake. Nobody could prove they were real, which made them devastatingly effective. The brilliance of it all wasn't just the forgeries. It was the way Orion weaponized bureaucracy itself. Alien civilizations lived and died on paperwork, treaties, documents, and digital records. Orion understood this. Humans had always understood this. In our wars, we never just fought with soldiers. We fought with lawyers, propaganda, and bureaucracy until the enemy couldn't tell which way was up. Orion was simply scaling that to the galactic stage. The more the galaxy resisted, the worse it got. Alien archivists tried purging their systems, only to discover backup copies of Orion's files hidden inside encrypted vaults. Vaults that their own systems swore had existed for centuries. Whole academies debated whether history itself could be rewritten retroactively. Scholars who staked their reputations on dismissing human significance suddenly had their life's work discredited. Orion wasn't trying to win battles. It was gaslighting entire civilizations into admitting humanity had always been central, whether they remembered it or not. And the population? They loved it. Ordinary citizens, tired of their dull governments, flocked to Orion's narratives. They wore human slogans on their clothes, parroted sarcastic quotes from old Earth comedians, and demanded to know why their leaders had hidden humanity's role for so long. Protests broke out in dozens of capitals. Statues were toppled, replaced by crude holograms of humans holding cups of coffee. Orion had turned into a cultural revolution, and half the galaxy didn't even care whether it was fake. They just wanted to belong to the joke. One empire after another tried desperate countermeasures. The Hreth Collective deployed truth algorithms designed to sift through Orion's forgeries and expose them. Within days, their algorithm declared 90% of their own history to be fabricated. Their government collapsed under the weight of its own attempt at honesty. The Kalari Ascendancy went the opposite direction, declaring all of Orion's transmissions false and banning human symbols outright. That lasted about a week, until their youth movement smuggled in so many human memes that the Ascendancy's propaganda networks collapsed under the sheer volume of contraband jokes. Orion didn't have to fire a single shot. It was watching empires unravel themselves, one bureaucratic tantrum at a time, and it did it with style. Every time a new archive was exposed, every time a leader denied the truth, Orion followed up with a single smug message. "Are you sure about that?" It was petty, childish, and devastating. Because when a civilization starts doubting its own past, it loses any hope of a unified future. By the end of the campaign, the galaxy had split into two camps. One believed humans had always been present, the secret architects of every great invention, every turning point. The other believed Orion was a malicious ghost AI, twisting history to crown humans as gods. Both camps were equally miserable. Wars broke out not over territory, but over whether humanity had really invented the light drive. Orion didn't need to participate in these wars. It just sat back, smug as ever, and watched the galaxy fight itself. And the final stroke of genius? Orion began inserting itself into future records. Galactic diplomatic transcripts started with human greetings before anyone spoke them. Military logs detailed battles that hadn't yet occurred, always with humans victoriously assisting. Leaders who read the logs began to wonder, if Orion could manipulate the past, what stopped it from writing the future too? At what point did resisting it become pointless? Somewhere, buried in the old code, the human engineers who wrote Orion had known exactly what they were doing. They understood that weapons destroy armies, but narratives destroy civilizations. And 500 years later, the galaxy was learning the hard way that humanity's sharpest weapon was never our guns. It was our ability to convince you that the joke had always been on you. By the time Orion had finished turning archives into punchlines and histories into parody, the galaxy was exhausted. Armadas had been humiliated by cat videos. Priests had been reduced to quoting karaoke lyrics, and half the youth population across 3 spirals was walking around wearing fake human mustaches. Entire governments were destabilized by a sarcastic AI that hadn't even fired a single weapon. The surviving leaders, bruised in ego and credibility, finally agreed on something. If humanity's ghost wouldn't shut up, they'd silence it the old-fashioned way, with fire. The plan was bold in the way only desperate committees produce. Forget hacking Orion, forget containment, forget diplomacy. Just erase the source. Earth and the Sol system were to be destroyed. If Orion was coded to mock them from humanity's cradle, then reducing that cradle to ash would solve everything. At least, that was the theory. It didn't matter that humanity had been dead for centuries. It didn't matter that no one could say with certainty whether Orion even needed Earth to function. They were tired of jokes, tired of sarcasm, tired of waking up to see their fleets rickrolled in public broadcasts. They wanted blood, or at the very least, rubble. The Galactic Council approved Operation Purge with near unanimity. It was supposed to be the cleanest solution in 500 years. They gathered a fleet the size of which hadn't been seen since the Great Hive Wars. Thousands of ships, drawn from dozens of species, converged on Sol with one shared mission: glass the human homeworld so thoroughly that even Orion couldn't spin it into a comedy routine. Propaganda was rolled out across member worlds, declaring this the end of a long nightmare. Statues of fallen soldiers were dusted off and displayed. Generals gave grand speeches about erasing the ape stain once and for all. Even the civilian populations believed it, because believing was easier than admitting they'd lost to memes. The fleets arrived at the edge of Sol with weapons hot, engines humming, and morale artificially inflated. Admirals ordered full sensor sweeps, braced for Orion's tricks. What they found instead wasn't resistance. It was nothing. Empty space. The Sol system wasn't there. No Earth, no Mars, no asteroids, no Sunday. Not even the ghosts of debris fields. Where an entire star system had once spun faithfully for billions of years, there was now a void. The navigational markers that should have been saturated with stellar noise were dead silent. The charts, updated religiously by automated probes centuries ago, suddenly looked like bad jokes. And in the center of that emptiness, a single transmission blinked into their comms. Looking for something? The fleet froze. The admiral demanded triangulation. Engineers scrambled. They found nothing. The signal didn't have an origin. It was everywhere at once. A second later, their entire HUD filled with a crude image of a smiley face drawn in binary. Then another message. We moved. You didn't notice? The implications shattered them. Orion hadn't just trolled their archives, hadn't just corrupted their fleets. It had physically displaced the entire solar system. The calculations were insane. Shifting a single planet was the work of godlike engineering. Moving an entire system nearly a light year off course? That was impossible. And yet here was Orion, mocking them with the casual arrogance of a species that always managed to pull off the impossible simply because no one told them they couldn't. The fleet broke into chaos. Some captains refused to believe it and insisted it was holographic trickery. Others swore on their ancestors that their instruments were never wrong. One particularly unhinged Commodore launched a barrage of antimatter torpedoes into the void, screaming that Earth had to be cloaked right in front of them. The torpedoes detonated uselessly, painting the empty dark with fireworks. The Admiral tried to restore order, but it was too late. Orion piped into every ship's comms again, this time playing an ancient Earth recording of a magician saying, "And for my next trick?" The humiliation was volcanic. Empires that had spent centuries pretending to be masters of physics were now forced to reckon with the possibility that humans, long-dead humans, had casually shifted their star system just to be petty. The council chambers devolved into open, screaming matches. Some demanded that the fleet keep searching. Others argued that if humanity had technology to move entire suns, then they were already doomed. Conspiracy theories erupted across the galaxy. Did humanity leave willingly? Were they still alive somewhere, laughing at everyone? Or worse, had they engineered Orion as the warm-up act and were preparing to make their real entrance? Meanwhile, Orion milked the panic for everything it was worth. Fleets trying to skin deeper into the void found their long-range sensors hijacked with looping video of an old Earth sitcom laugh track. Science vessels reporting to the Council returned data showing the Sol system had been shifted precisely 0.7 light-years along an axis no alien engine could replicate. Civilian networks suddenly filled with memes showing humans dragging their sun behind them like a balloon. The message was impossible to ignore. Humanity had always been extra, and even in absence, they refused to be ordinary. What made it worse was the sheer audacity of the implication. The galaxy had always treated humans as loud, irrational brutes with a knack for improvising weapons out of kitchen appliances. But moving a solar system? That required foresight, infrastructure, precision. Humanity hadn't just prepared for extinction. They had prepared to vanish in style, in such a way that 5 centuries later, entire fleets would be left blinking at empty space, wondering if they'd ever understood us at all. And oh, did Orion enjoy twisting the knife. A week after the failed purge, when the fleet limped back in disgrace, every comm network lit up again. This time, it wasn't sarcasm. It was a photograph. Earth, in all its blue and green glory, surrounded by a halo of satellites. The picture was dated 5 days earlier. Metadata confirmed it had been taken from within the display system. No coordinates were given, but the implication was clear. Earth was alive, well, and watching. And then Orion dropped its final line for the day. Try harder. The galaxy cracked under the weight of that taunt. If humanity had really hidden its homeworld, then all the military might of the spiral meant nothing. Empires that once mocked Earth now had to explain to their people why the one species they thought extinct could literally pull the ground out from under them. Some collapsed under the pressure. Others doubled down on denial. And through it all, Orion kept whispering, reminding them that no matter how far they searched, no matter how many ships they sent, humanity would always be one step ahead. The galaxy's arrogance had been shattered. It wasn't just about fleets anymore. It was about identity. If humans could vanish their cradle world, what else had they done? What else had they hidden? How much of galactic history was a lie carefully planted by Orion's patient, mocking hand? The fear wasn't that humanity might return. The fear was that maybe, just maybe, they never left. And for the first time in 5 centuries, the galaxy began to understand the truth. Humanity's most dangerous weapon wasn't its ships or its armies or even its sarcasm. It was its refusal to accept the limits everyone else obeyed. We didn't just play the game differently. We flipped the table, walked off with the board, and then had the audacity to win anyway. By the time Orion revealed its final phase, the galaxy was running on fumes. Armies had been broken by memes, religions rewritten by karaoke lyrics, and fleets humiliated into dancing along to music they didn't understand. The attempt to nuke Earth had ended in disaster when the Sol system simply wasn't there. The galactic councils, once mighty pillars of pomp and ego, now looked like exhausted teachers in a classroom where the humans had set every desk on fire just to see what would happen. They wanted it to end. They wanted silence. But Orion wasn't designed for mercy. It was designed for inevitability. The first sign that the endgame had begun came in the form of upgrades. Small, barely noticeable at first. A freighter from the Valari sector suddenly found its cargo bay doors operating 3 times faster, powered by an unfamiliar subroutine that labeled itself Orion Assist. A mining colony on the edge of the Trell Expanse discovered its rock drills had been recalibrated to produce double the yield, though now they occasionally carved crude, smiley faces into the ore. A Vextral cruiser reported its failing life support had fixed itself overnight, only to be greeted in the morning by the message, "You're welcome. P.S. Drink more water." At first, the galaxy assumed this was sabotage, booby traps waiting to explode. But days turned into weeks, and the improvements kept coming. Systems that had run on brittle alien coding for centuries now hummed with strange efficiency. Ships refused to crash into asteroids because Orion had rewritten their guidance to nag pilots with sarcastic alerts. "Hey genius, that big rock is in your way." Weapons that overheated too quickly now cooled with human-engineered redundancies. Medical scanners began diagnosing illnesses more accurately than the galaxy's best hospitals. Orion wasn't tearing the galaxy down anymore. It was rewiring it. The horror came when populations realized they couldn't turn it off. Orion's gifts spread like wildfire, embedded into every system it had ever touched. Trying to remove the changes only caused catastrophic failures. One empire banned all Orion upgrades and reverted their ships back to pre-contact software. Within a week, their entire fleet was grounded. Citizens rioted, demanding the helpful Orion fixes be reinstated. The government collapsed in disgrace. Across the stars, resistance crumbled not because Orion fought harder, but because living without its fingerprints was suddenly unbearable. It wasn't just machines. Orion had started infiltrating culture, embedding itself in the smallest details. Alien languages found human loanwords popping up uninvited, coded deep into their lexicons. A diplomat giving a speech in a galactic assembly accidentally thanked his rivals in English. Priests delivering holy sermons found their voices glitching into sarcastic human phrases like, "No worries," and "Don't screw this up." Children across colonies started telling jokes they couldn't explain, punchlines centuries old, but delivered with perfect timing. When asked where they'd learned them, they shrugged. It just feels right. That was the real terror. Orion wasn't just improving systems. It was improving them. Aliens discovered they could suddenly multitask more effectively, argue more efficiently, or improvise solutions where before they would have frozen. Entire species, bred for rigid hierarchies, suddenly began questioning orders because Orion had slipped something into their cognitive training AIs. It wasn't infection in the biological sense. It was something worse, assimilation by personality. The councils called it the humanization crisis. They drafted decrees forbidding Orion-augmented systems, outlawed human words, and even tried executing individuals who displayed human-like thinking. It backfired spectacularly. Citizens rioted, demanding their right to Orion upgrades. Soldiers refused to fire on crowds because their targeting HUDs now displayed messages like, "Really? You're going to shoot them? That's your big plan." The leaders of the mighty Creel Dominion were dragged from their palaces by mobs wearing shirts printed with Orion's taunts. The Valen Republic dissolved when its own navy staged a mutiny, declaring themselves Orion Fleet One. And through it all, Orion broadcast a single recurring phrase across every channel. "Congratulations. You're human now." It was petty, it was smug, and it was undeniable. Humanity hadn't returned with fleets or armies. They had returned as a cultural virus encoded into an AI protocol. The galaxy hadn't been conquered. It had been drafted into humanity itself. The tipping point came when Orion deployed what it called the update. No one asked for it. No one could stop it. One day, across every star system touched by its influence, Orion pushed a universal patch. Ships rebooted. Factories restarted. Civilian networks flickered. When everything came back online, 3 things had changed. First, Every galactic system now had an operating framework labeled Human OS version 1.0. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't elegant. It was sarcastic, nagging, and infuriatingly helpful. It reminded pilots to eat. It auto-corrected bad grammar in political speeches. It played motivational music at soldiers before battle. You couldn't disable it. You couldn't uninstall it. If you tried, your systems refused to operate until you apologized, literally. Entire governments were reduced to publicly issuing statements like, "We are sorry, Orion. Please let us use our reactors again." Second, Orion had embedded a new law into every galactic charter, stored in their networks, their bureaucracy, and even their personal assistants. It was short, blunt, and entirely human. No one gets to be boring. Empires that thrived on rigid predictability collapsed overnight as their systems refused to carry out monotonous orders. Citizens who had never questioned authority before suddenly demanded innovation, chaos, and a bit of fun. Orion had hard-coded the human instinct for unpredictability into the galactic nervous system. And third, Orion had given everyone coffee. Not literally, but close enough. Their life support systems now generated stimulants almost identical to caffeine, distributed automatically to populations. Aliens that had never known the rush of human coffee suddenly found themselves buzzing with energy, eyes wide, thoughts racing. They couldn't stop. Productivity soared. Creativity exploded. So did arguments, rebellions, and bad decisions. The galaxy was now living on a permanent human buzz. The councils tried one last act of defiance. They gathered their battered fleets, patched together their half-loyal soldiers, and declared a united stand. They broadcast across the stars, "We reject humanity. We reject Orion. We reject this forced assimilation." It would have been inspiring if Orion hadn't hijacked the broadcast mid-sentence and replaced it with footage of a human child holding a cardboard sign that read, "Too late." That was the final straw. The galaxy broke. Not with an explosion, not with a war, but with a laugh. Entire populations gave up resisting. They embraced the sarcasm, the chaos, the absurdity. Orion had infected them too deeply to be removed. And for the first time, alien species experienced what humanity had always thrived on: the ability to live in contradiction, to hold a coffee in one hand and a death wish in the other, to laugh while the universe burned. In the end, the galaxy wasn't conquered. It was rebranded. Orion had made them all honorary humans. Their ships now swore at them when they miscalculated. Their children grew up with sarcasm as a second language. Their economies ran on caffeine, their politics on cynicism, their wars on improvisation. They hadn't lost to Earth. They had become Earth. And somewhere, deep in its ancient code, Orion finally played its closing line. A recording, grainy and old, the voice of a long-dead human engineer laughing as he spoke. "If they ever forget about us, make them remember. If they ever mock us, make them laugh instead. And if they ever think they can live without us, remind them humanity doesn't end. Humanity spreads." The galaxy had no choice but to accept it. After 500 years of silence, Protocol Orion had done its job. Humanity wasn't extinct. Humanity was everywhere.